Hello and welcome to Weekends with What the Math. As you can hear, my voice is slowly improving. I was a little bit sick, so I couldn't actually make any videos with any sound. And so some of the videos I've been kind of releasing are unfortunately without any commentary because, voice. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit more about some cool space news, and then I'm going to answer some of your questions from the previous video. So this is technically a Q&A. So let's start with the first thingy. And the first news is about the moon. Yes, again about the moon. The moon has been in the news a lot recently. And this one is actually kind of interesting because, okay, so there is this company called Pocari Sweat, which is kind of like Gatorade in Asia. And it's a Japanese company that is really, really popular in East Asia. And they are planning to, just to promote themselves even more, launch a can of their own product of Pocari Sweat, which is a funny name, to the moon. They actually are not only planning to launch it, but to keep it there forever. They're actually going to land whatever craft they're using to basically put a little can of Pocari Sweat on the moon as a promotion. I think it's kind of cool, even though it sounds a little bit crazy. Now you may think, well, isn't it gonna pop because there's no there's a vacuum on the moon and it's, it gets really hot? Well, for that reason, they're not actually going to be using the liquid Pocari Sweat. They're just going to put powder in there, which means that if you ever if we ever in the future land on the moon and go exploring and find the can of Pocari Sweat, all we need to do is put some water in it and there we go, there's a drink. Okay, well, this may not really sound as exciting as the next news also about the moon, and that is, of course, that Russia and ESA, which is the European Space Agency, are actually going to cooperate, and they're going to be sending men to the moon. By 2027, they're planning to not only send actual astronauts again back to the moon, but they're planning to make a permanent settlement. Now, obviously, China was saying the same thing, but, with the fact that Russia and European Space Agency have been able to achieve quite a lot in the last few years, I don't doubt that they will be able to do it. And there's some really cool plans that they have already. There's going to be a little house thingy that kind of looks like an igloo that they will be building, and all of it will be 3D printed. So they're actually going to be landing a 3D printer on the moon, and they'll be producing all of the materials by using it. If you want to read more about it, there's an article about all of this stuff in the description below. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about something different. So NASA has this really cool telescope called Kepler, which basically kind of looks at the stars and it tries to find things like new stars or planets around those stars by looking at their emissions. Now, recently, it's discovered really cool things. First of all, it's discovered this really, really weird star that has a very large object, massive object passing in front of it, or basically orbiting around it. Now, obviously, some people think it's possibly a very, 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 very large planet, or possibly something else that is not emitting any light and it's just huge. But obviously, some people are thinking that maybe it is some sort of a large construct from some kind of an intelligent extraterrestrial culture. It's up to you to decide what it is, but it's cool, and it's definitely a nice discovery of the year. You can read more about it in the description below. Now, exactly the same telescope also found something else earlier this year, and this something is really interesting. So usually when you look into the star and you see something kind of pass in front of it, you see a shadow. Sometimes you see many shadows, but sometimes you see shadow, just non-stop, kind of like almost as if there was a ring around the star. Now, this happens with young stars because they have like an accretion disk flying around them, and I've kind of demonstrated that in one of the videos when I was building the solar system from scratch. And it's normal to see that in young stars, but if it's an old star, it shouldn't happen. Now, this is exactly what they found. They found a really old star that has an accretion disk flying around it, and so they thought, they thought, what is going on there? And so there's actually a really cool paper someone wrote trying to figure out what it is. So there's a lot of theories about it, and one of the theories is that, well, maybe it is actually something called a Dyson Ring. A Dyson Ring is actually a construct that you see right here, and it's based on science fiction, obviously, but it's something that we think maybe in the future we'll be able to construct. It's sort of like a huge solar panel that collects all of this light from the sun and uses its immense energy to basically, power something up. So maybe that's what it is. But then the actual paper at the end kind of concludes that it's very likely that it's just a bunch of comets, many, many, many comets, huge comets just circling and orbiting around the sun. Even though we've never seen this before, but this is the best conclusion that they could come up with. Now, here is actually something really interesting. I'm going to show you a website, and this is related to Kepler. So Kepler is a very interesting telescope. What it does is, like I said, it looks at the stars and it looks at their emissions and it looks at the center of the star, and then it sees shadows. Now, because there's so many stars in our galaxy alone, we can't really find all of the possible planets. So they started something, and this is started by these NASA scientists from Kepler telescope. They started something called Planet Hunters, and you should totally join this because it is essentially kind of like a social network, although not really, but it kind of is. And here what you do is you help them classify different objects. So the way this works is there's a website called planethunters.org. And if you go here, it is going to teach you how to help Kepler scientists classify different stars and then possibly find planets that orbit those stars. Now, I kind of skipped the tutorial, but you should definitely go through this. But basically what it's asking you to do is if you see a star that suddenly drops in luminosity or the way it emits light, it's very likely it's because it has a planet around it. So please help us select it like this. If you select it like this and continue, and then do it for whatever stars you find, you will help these guys discover new planets. Now, I don't know if you get to choose the name of the planet later on, because that would be pretty cool. That would definitely convince me to do this every day. But if you keep doing this over and over, I'm sure they're going to thank you somehow. And all of this is essentially just to help them classify different stars and possibly discover new planets. Now, all of this is simply because there's like millions and billions and trillions, not trillions, but billions of stars in our galaxy. And unfortunately, there's just not enough people to do all of this. So they ask the volunteers and people like me, basically, to kind of do it for them and to help them discover new planets around new stars. So here we go. So this is actually the actual thingy that they give me. And here, there's no planets, but it looks like this star has changed luminosity. So I'm going to select this part just to kind of help them. Ooh, not this part at all. Just to help them discover it later on, and maybe they'll find something here. So obviously something happened here. The star used to be very dim and then suddenly became very bright. So maybe there's a solar flare. Maybe this is what I'm looking for. Maybe this is what I found in this particular star. And you can then sign in and even have your name in there and so on and so forth. And there's obviously a discussion and a group where you can kind of join in and talk to people and discuss all of this really cool stuff. So I think this is a really cool website that they started, and I definitely recommend anyone who loves space to join and help us discover more planets, because one day maybe we'll find something cool. Alright, and now for the Q&A. Some of you asked me a few questions in the previous video, and so I would like to just answer them because I think they were awesome questions. Alright, first question is this. And ThunderGrim88 is asking me if I have any siblings. The answer to that is no, and I'm kind of happy I don't, because if I had a brother or a sister, they would most likely not give me any opportunity to learn so much about space science, because they would probably always be nagging me, always asking me questions, always trying to, take away my space toys. And most importantly, they would always or never actually give me a chance to kind of sit down in silence and to kind of start thinking about space and think about all of this astrophysics and astronomy that I used to love so much. All of this only came to me because even though I was always kind of alone at night, it gave me a chance to use my imagination and imagine space a lot more. So no, I don't have any brothers and sisters, but I'm thankful I don't. And here's second and third question. This is from Helix, and once again from ThunderGrim88. Where are you from and where did you grow up? So it's a very complicated question. Many people do not know how to answer these questions. In my case, I think I'm from Canada, because that's where I grew up. I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and I've also lived in Toronto for a very long time. But I was actually born in Russia, which is why my name is Russian. And so many people ask me all the time, are you from Russia? And technically, I guess, but not really. I'm technically from Canada. And here's another two questions from Omega Eggy and Moloch Tao. So one person is asking me, so where do you teach? And the other person is basically answering that question. And why do you teach in South Korea? So yes, I do currently work and teach in South Korea, and I'm a math teacher. I work here. I live here and so on and so forth. And why is, I guess it's a good question. So this has to do with what I studied in university, but also what I do for a living. I don't just teach math. I actually teach math through video games. And because I use video games in teaching, which is why I have so many educational video game reviews, because of that, I basically had to come to Korea, because this is actually the only country where not only are there video games like everywhere, but video games and education is a kind of a topic that they try to explore here. And it's a lot easier for me to basically get a job where I get to use video games in class in South Korea. Unfortunately, back home in Canada, it was a little bit more difficult, and I was just a math teacher. But here, I'm a math teacher that uses video games. And lastly, Andreas Athanasakis, I hope I did not mispronounce your name, is basically telling me that when is his revenge, because when I was doing the Twitch with him, he volunteered to be one of the Kerbals on a space mission, and then we kind of just died because parachute didn't open. Well, listen, Andreas, revenge can come next time we're twitching. You can choose whatever you want as a reward, and I'm sorry I ended up destroying the spaceship. Things happen, okay? The parachute decided to vacate the spacecraft, and things just did not go right for us. And yes, I'm sorry, it happened. Next time, it's on me, whatever you want. Anyway, I think I'm going to pause this here. In the next video, next weekend, we're going to talk about more stuff, more space stuff, more cool things, and hopefully you'll have more questions. So if you have a question to ask me, post it in the comments below. I'm going to answer it next week. If you would like me to talk about something specific, please let me know in the comments below. Or if you have some really cool news you've read online about space, universe, or math, let me know. We'll talk about it next week. Stay tuned for more info about Twitch. It's coming up soon. And also more videos coming because my voice is now back. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you so much, and game you later. Bye-bye.